3. Earth's Tempest. A blaring horn sounded, and the deep tone coursed through Amelia like adrenaline. She dropped her pencil onto the papers spread across their bed and ran out of the room. "Earthbound!" Her hands deftly worked her long hair back into a thick braid. "Must be," Knox said, already pulling on his boots. "Stay here, I'll be right back." "Black sky, I will." She shot him a withering glare. Taryn held up his hands. "Both of you should stay. Oh, for all the order holds, no one is staying. Now move!" Knox pushed him forward, and Amelia followed them both out onto the raised porch. A simple guardrail edged the boardwalk, connecting their home to those around it. The horn continued to pulse its warning, and those not commissioned for the defense of Rickon hurried to take shelter. Worry-pinched faces lifted at the sight of Taryn, shouting words of encouragement as they passed. "Don't wait for us! Go!" Knox urged Taryn. "We'll catch up!" With a glance back, Taryn grabbed the railing and jumped over in a fluid movement, easily absorbing the several-meter drop. The sight of an overseer using their strength made Amelia's pulse quicken. Knox used to move like that. The impossible strides and airborne leaps mimicking flight. Knox tried to convince her he didn't miss it, but she saw how his eyes tracked Taryn's movements and the pain he tried to hide. Rickon was a modest-sized cluster for the reaches, with stilted buildings built into the contours of the low foothills. They did not dig into the earth if it could be helped. As with most places, the cluster was a blend of function and form, old and new melding together. It manifested in stilted wooden structures linked by boardwalks and packed dirt roads, generators and hover tech that coexisted with wood-fire hearths and long poles. Knox reached for her hand and pulled her in the opposite direction. "I have a plan." A couple of months ago, Knox would have run off with Taryn, and she would have been left chasing after them on her own. "He's here now." She gripped his hand tighter, trying to squeeze out the guilt of such a thought. He looked back at her. "Do you need to slow down?" "No, keep going," she said between breaths. He pulled them under a nearby building and navigated through the stilted supports. They emerged a street over, and Knox pointed, a half-grin pulling at his cheek. She followed his line of sight to a messenger hovercraft. "Logan pulled everyone from the lower fields this morning, so I figured Rain's craft would be parked." His eyes glinted with no small amount of pride. "How very clever of you," she said. The small machine had a bench seat across the front and few comforts, but a generous motor. Its flatbed was wider than the cab section and was used for an endless variety of tasks around the cluster. Knox jogged ahead and started the machine. Amelia reached for the roll bar and pulled herself into the vehicle. Before he engaged the drive, he flashed her a pleading look. "Any chance you want to stay with your mother? I could drop you off there first." Worry lay in tension lines around his mouth. "Enough," she said, giving his hand a quick squeeze. "We go together or not at all?" He nodded, considering her words. "The baby?" She noted his poorly concealed concern. "They are tucked in safe and sound. As you said this morning, we are the same now, the normal amount of fragile." He let out a breath and a wry-sounding chuckle. "So I did." Bless the sky, this man was her everything. He knew her, heart and soul, and made her infinitely brave. Why doesn't he want me to go with him to the capital? She couldn't help but feel unnerved by his not-so-subtle maneuvering with Taryn. The only reason that made any sense was the trip presented a greater danger than he let on. She pushed the conversation from her mind. They would discuss it later, and she would join him. She'd never let him face the order on his own again. Amelia glanced at Knox as he drove through the cluster, a cloud of dust tracking behind them. His brow creased, and his lips pressed into a thin line. Something had him deep in thought, but she'd learned long ago Knox often needed time, not prompting. As they cleared the edge of town, he finally spoke. "I don't think we are equally fragile, yet." She raised an eyebrow curiously. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I am still connected, maybe, to the sky." He glanced at her from the side of his eye. I was disavowed, but I feel a remnant of something. Maybe because I laid down my power rather than breaking my oath or an assurance it's different? She glanced at the scar on his hand, the words sour in the back of her throat. You aren't healing. They made sure you were no longer an overseer. He seemed unperturbed. It's definitely not the sky's power, but more a sense she hasn't completely abandoned me. Emilia's stomach flipped at the thought of him holding on to any piece of those who abandoned him, deity or not. Nox directed the craft onto the path leading to the upper fields and towards the sounds of the alarm. The road opened, and he accelerated. Emilia's eyes traced his face, a mix of concentration and excitement moving across his features. The afternoon sun pooled at the hints of red in his beard and hair. His straight nose and strong jaw were handsome even in profile. Best I can equate it to is the power we have as acolytes before taking our full vows, but instead of the invulnerability acolytes carry, I've been left with residual strength. Maybe there is always a remnant, Nox mused, raising his voice over the rush of wind as they passed through a grove of fruit trees. The hopeful lilt to his voice stabbed at her. She wanted to believe he could hold on to even a small piece of his former self, but as far as she could tell, the Order never gave anything without strings attached. You deserve far more. A flicker of doubt crossed his features. Maybe not, but at least I can still serve. He flashed her a smile, a sparkle returning to the silvery gray of his eyes. Dread gathered in a knot at her throat, and she gripped the roll bar tighter. He would always stand between others and danger, regardless of whether he had the sky's strength behind him or not. I'll be careful, Em. I have far too much to live for now to throw it away being reckless. He glanced at her and reached for her hand, giving it a squeeze. I don't know how I ever got so lucky as to have you. His smile loosened the bands of worry around her chest. She loved that smile. It was warm and open, a side of himself he showed very few people. You are pretty lucky, she teased. A chuckle broke through, and he rolled his eyes. As the road climbed, maples and oaks vibrant in the greens of summer stretched toward the light, creating a canopy over the road before they suddenly gave way to sky and the sharp relief of the resolute mountains cutting into the blue. Here, plateaued fields were used to grow hardy varieties of mountain grains, which would be turning golden in the coming weeks. Nox slowed as they climbed from a depression of one of the low foothills. Voices yelling, the hum of other hovercraft, and most disturbingly, the sound of earth moving echoed across the veldt. It came in the scratching note of a metal tool through dirt, or the echo of rocks rolling down a loose cliff face, but louder. The harsh grating of stone on stone filled her chest. Nox threw her a worried look and pushed the vehicle forward. They crested the rise to the worked land of the plateau, and Emilia tried to make sense of what she was seeing. Chaos reigned. The once planted field had been transformed into a rough sea. Mounds of earth had been tossed skyward and reformed into cascading waves, frozen towers on the once flat surface. Hovercraft zipped over the rough terrain, ferrying workers out of the squall. The unlucky ones remained trapped in the violent earth, limbs captured in their retreat and held fast as earth solidified. Desperate cries pressed like knives into Emilia's gut, and she spotted Terran running into the churned field, clambering over the incongruent peaks and valleys as fast as he could manage toward a young woman who was trapped. There! Emilia pointed Nox toward Terran. The girl had been caught in the roll of a wave, her body pinned near the surface. Her face was half pressed into the dirt with only one arm free, desperately clawing at the solid earth. Terran dropped next to her and joined the effort to dig free the soil nearest her head. The girl wriggled as he pulled great scoops of dirt away from her face with his hands. Her chest broke free a moment later, and he grabbed under her arms and heaved her out of the ground. Nox pushed forward, engines whining with strain. She could tell from his expression that he was taking in the field with an analytical eye, triaging the whole scene. Terran spotted them, and with the girl's hands clasped around his neck, he crouched and launched himself out of the dip in the ground. Nox guessed his trajectory and stopped short of Terran's landing. Terran's amber eyes blazed as he stepped up to the craft. It's still here. It resurfaced a moment ago. That sound they heard must have been the creature. Amelia shuddered. Taryn lay the dirt-caked girl onto the flat deck of the craft. She sat up, stunned, tears streaming down her face. "Come up here with me," Amelia said, shifting tight next to Knox and patting the seat. On shaky limbs, the girl climbed through the open roll frame and gripped the side bar. Amelia rubbed her back, murmuring assurances. Up close, she realized she knew the young woman. The youngest Levin girl? Winnie, right? You're safe now. The girl's eyes flicked to Amelia at her name, and she gave a sharp nod before her eyes returned to scanning the landscape. Taryn grimaced as he hopped up on the flat deck and crouched down, hanging on to the back of their seats. "We've seen 2 more liquefaction points since we started pulling people from the field." "The granites?" Knox asked. Taryn's mouth pulled tight, and he gave a sharp shake to his head. "Bigger." Bigger? They had nothing bigger in the Mercurial. A cold dread curled in Amelia's gut. "Let's get those we can to safety quickly, then," Knox said. He started a search formation while Amelia and Taryn kept their eyes on the ruined field. Earthbound impacted matter around them, usually in a bubble 2 to 3 times their size. By the traces left behind, this beast was truly enormous, much larger than the one Taryn and Knox had described in the lower field. Liquefaction astounded Amelia. The fact that creatures of the earth could fluidize solid matter while maintaining its distinct physical properties boggled the mind. Soil remained soil but moved as liquid around the beasts. For reasons unknown, plants and organic matter remained unchanged. "How many are missing?" Knox asked. "At least a dozen," Taryn answered. "Logan brought all the crews up here to work in safety. Being near the mountain, he didn't think anything bigger than a scuttle could get close." Amelia's eyes prickled with tears, and she noticed Knox's jaw flex in similar emotion. She wove her fingers into his and gripped his hand tight, turning her knuckles white. "Head to the irrigation substation. It's safe amongst the dense grove of trees." Taryn motioned with his head toward the far end of the field. They could use some help organizing people and figuring out who we are still missing. I know you... I can do it," she said. Knox redirected the craft and made for the trees, the engine's whine increasing in pitch. He gave her a side-eyed glance, and she could read the relief in his posture. "Thanks, Em." She cast a meaningful look at the deformed field. "I'll be of more use off the field. Be careful out there, we have a fight to finish later." He pulled an exaggerated grimace and snorted. "I knew we weren't done with that." She squeezed his arm. "Of course we're not. I'm never letting you go without a fight." He slowed the craft as they neared the field's edge, hazarding a quick look in her direction and holding her gaze for an extended beat. "I'll be back as soon as I can." Moments later, Amelia stood with those at the pump station, her arm around Winnie, and watched the small craft skipping back across the rough earth, carrying the culmination of her heart's dreams out into the earth's tempest.